So welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and to what I believe is the first time that I've repeated a map on 0.97, but in this case I'm not too concerned about it because it's a map that I didn't actually play on before 0.97, so it's still relatively new. This is OST in ERY, which I mistakenly referred to as Harmenden, I believe, the last time we showed it off, and last time it was only a 2v3, now it is a 5v3, so we're going to be seeing presumably quite a lot more of the map being utilised, especially by the attackers who now have a ton of disposable manpower, especially seeing as 4 of the attacking factions are orcs and the other one is a force of evil men. We'll see how well the defenders are able to hold out against these rather long odds that have been placed upon them. But I think we'll go through the attackers right away. We'll go through the army compositions relatively quickly because I think at this point everyone is starting to get used to the new things that are in 0.97, so there's no need to spend quite so much time on them. Dunlending Clansmen, of course, the closest thing that Isengard have to fodder, only they do cost a little bit of money, but their heightened abilities against cavalry do mean that they are much more worth it than like a standard unit fodder, so it's worth spending a bit of money on them. Some ERY infantry, obviously a very solid unit on the front line for Isengard, something which the other orcs, other than Angmar, really lack, but even then the ERY infantry do tend to perform a little bit better as damage dealers than the Guardians of Kharn do. We have the mighty Nazkai, a very, very strong General's Bodyguard unit indeed, capable of doing a ton of damage to the right kinds of units. Obviously, like any General's Bodyguard unit though, low man count. More ERY infantry. We also have some more AP in the half-orc Baneguard. You don't actually see the Baneguard brought that much because they have less men in the unit than both the Dunlending Wild Berserkers and the ERY Reavers, but they do have better defensive stats to make up for that, so it is sort of a bit of give and take. They are technically better if you can get them into melee, but obviously, you know, their lower unit count means that they can fizzle out a little bit more quickly. Some ERY crossmen, of course, you know, the crossbows are always going to be a big part of Isengard's army, and then we have some ERY pikemen, and of course, an Isengard ballista, a potentially fantastic tool in a siege, even if with the shape of Ost in ERY, I'm not sure how well that they will be able to utilise that. Then we have the player who sent me the battle replay. It's going to be Lango, and he's playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains with several units of Mountain Uruk Host, a very good unit of line infantry for what they cost, which the Misty Mountains now have access to. They better make the most of it though, because I think, again, like the White Uruk Fearmongers, they are likely to lose that to Dol Guldur when they materialise. Some heavy goblin crossbows. Azog is going to be in a unit of heavy goblin infantry, so he's obviously going to be kept back until the end. Cave troll drummers and standard cave trolls for buffing morale and breaking through the lines respectively. Heavy goblin infantry, of course, as the fodder that the Misty Mountains often are known for with their great numbers. Some Snaga skirmishes for some javelins as well. Black Uruks, which two-handed swords, you know, they're not anything too special when you compare them to the equivalent human or elven units, but still they're far better in terms of defensive skill than anything else the Misty Mountains has on offer at that level. Regular goblin infantry, some heavy goblin archers, and then back here also some heavy goblin spears, a mainstay in the Misty Mountains army, a very solid unit indeed, with their AP and good shield value. In the middle, we then have the one Evil Men faction which are being brought to bear today, so a bit more quality perhaps from Cormin's army. Umbar, of course. Did I mention who's playing as Isengard? Because it's Harold if I didn't. Cormin's army, however, he's got some Balagar pikemen on the front line. Just in behind them, he's got some Corsair infantry, of course. They have a few volleys before they then pull out their scimitars and close into melee. Some Naruna Iru sentinels, in addition to some Adunaim shield guards, so some very heavily armoured black Numenorians. I think all of them as well are locked morale. And the sentinels buff nearby morale of other units. Balakith Axeguard, probably the best upper end axemen from most of the human kingdoms, just because their defensive skill is actually pretty decent, which is obviously the downfall of most units like this. Their armour, however, without the armour upgrade is not brilliant, but still, you know, they will still be able to do a good job on the front line damage wise if they can close. Balakith Marksman, a very good unit of archers for skirmishing. And then finally, Castamir is going to be going with his Harbingers here at the back, very good unit of heavy swordsmen, of course. Then we move on to Mordor, played by Grizzly Fox. He's got some Orc Javelins, just a little bit further in front he's got some Trop Drummers. Obviously buffing morale for Mordor, very important, more in common with the Misty Mountains than the other Orc factions. Orc fodder and Moranor Guard and Halberds at the front, and then a long line of a combination of Orc Maulers and Moranor infantry, so a lot of numbers being brought here by Mordor, as you would expect in this sort of situation. Obviously they're going to be bringing a lot in terms of manpower, Orc Javelins, and then I would imagine back here, there are some Orc Archers as well, but I would imagine at the back we'll start to see some of Mordor's units which are going to be used at key moments in the battle, including the Blackguard, of course. So most of Mordor's army is made up of lower tier units, but if you can use the Blackguard at the right time, that would be devastating, of course. And then the one really damaging unit that I can see from Mordor are the Nazgul. The Nazgul, if they can embed themselves in all this fodder, it's going to be very, very difficult to smoke them out. And then finally, of course, we have actually some more Orc fodder, but finally we do have the Witch Realm of Angmar, played by Jean-Baptiste. He has got some Guardians of Khan Doom on the front line, as well as some Blackwatch Legion, so another mass pushing unit. We haven't seen mass pushes work out all that well, actually, in 0.97. We've seen them fail more often than succeed. But on this sort of map, it can be incredibly useful, and they also have a huge numbers advantage, so if they do it at the right time, should be a good move, I think. Some Witch Realm Pikemen, both types of trolls, the Trolls of Angmar and the Trolls of Gundabad, and then of course the Witches, which if they are used at the right time, considering the numbers advantage the attackers have, it could be devastating. With the rest of his army, I would assume, yeah, we see Orc Fellas hiding. I would assume there's probably some Snaga in there as well, so not a huge amount of quality actually from Angmar, surprisingly enough. They've gone for a little bit more of a numbers focus, which they can do as an Orc faction. Of course, you just often see them lean far more heavily into their quality. Now onto the defenders. The defender who starts off within the settlement is going to be Lucky Hussar, playing as the Realm of Lothlorien, my personal favourite Elven faction in the game at the moment, I would say, with the changes that they've been given. We have some Marchwardens of the Wood with their poison arrows, which, considering the lower tier nature of a lot of the forces amassed against them, could be very, very useful indeed. The morale debuff that they apply. Spears of the Wood, potentially not as useful. I'm not really sure how well they're going to perform here. There are, obviously, Elven Spears are going to be better against infantry than most other spears, just because of their skill. But I'm not sure whether they have it in them to do as much damage as perhaps Lucky Hussar might want. The Blades of the Wood are a different matter. Obviously, basic Elven line infantry like this is often capable of punching above its weight. Lorinand Mounted Company back here. Several units of the Lorinand Warriors. Obviously, something that the other Elven factions also kind of lack is a two-handed axeman, a dedicated two-handed axeman anyway. And Merc would, of course, have got some hybrids. But in this case, obviously, Lothlorien have access to some good AP. Some Karos Gladhorn's Guardians, completely unsurprising to see them in this situation. They can hold the line for an awfully long time. And then the unit which I outed as my favourite in my most recent top 10 in 0.97, the Kindred of Celeborn with their split shot arrows. And then back here we have yet more Lothlorien forces, including some Lorinand archers. 2 units of Lorinand archers, actually. It's a fairly small army from Lothlorien, and we'll see how well that works out. Back down in this corner, played by Thick Dick, we have Dorwinian. So he's got a lot of Elvelen, perhaps making up for Lothlorien's slightly smaller army. Elvelen marksman. Lothlorien, of course, can have a lot of hidden units as well, which I'm sure are up there. But even still, Lothlorien are not going to be able to field as many units as Dorwinian. We have Morroquendi bows and pikes, so to give some more elves to the front line. Elvelen Vanguard, infantry, more infantry. I'm just wondering whereabouts the general's bodyguard would be. Whether it's the... I can see the Elvelen Hammer Guard in there, so I would assume that that's it. Although I'm not sure. I would probably bring the Glade Masters as well, if I were Dorwinian. 2 very, very powerful units, but the Hammer Guard are certainly there. And then finally, we have KFC Limecan, a player I've never seen before. I would recognise that name anywhere. He's going to be playing as Gondor, some marksmen of Caer Andros over here. Some standard Gondor archers with the first level of armour upgrade. Nimlothian Honour Guard, Wardens of the White Tower, so a lot of quality already. The Trebuchet, which could be devastating if used correctly. We'll see some Gondor infantry as well without the armour upgrades this time, so just the standard mail and tabards on them. That will allow him to spend more money elsewhere. Some upgraded spearmen, so slightly tankier on the spears. And then back here we have 2 Fountain Guard and 2 Citadel Guard, so a pretty well-rounded Gondor army. And I would imagine nothing is hidden there, unlike Dorwinian and Lothlorien, who can have some hidden units. And now I think I will make a little cut, because obviously it's going to take a little while for the attackers to move into a position where they can start attacking the settlement. And obviously the defenders are also a little bit disparate as well because of the deployment zones at the start. But yeah, a cut it will be. So the first bit of action actually is probably a bit of a pathfinding error, to be honest. This unit of Elvelen Vanguard went a different direction to the other units of Dorwinian who went further into the settlement. Of course, they decided to try and take the long way around. You can see here the Riders of the Goldenwood revealing themselves, and immediately they're going to get the trolls to retreat, of course, with those Silverthorn arrows. They will be able to knock the trolls over, I believe, if you get a good hit on them. I've seen the high mass arrows knock trolls over before, although this time it feels as though they're going to be able to get away just fine. But that's a pretty fortunate save there from Dorwinian. They can't afford to lose any individual units, even basic spears like the Elvelen Vanguard, because of course every man will count as we go further and further into this particular match. And I can see already what the attackers are going to be doing here. Umbar are going to be hanging back, not advancing right through the middle immediately, because otherwise they'll be absolutely ripped apart by Lothlorien's archers in their superior position. And all of the Orc factions are going to be going around the sides, so the Orcs are going to be pressuring them from the sides. They're going to be trying to do enough damage, and then late on, when the defenders are fatigued and really starting to fall apart, that's when I assume Umbar will be called upon to advance forward and do their thing. Meanwhile over here, we do have some Lorinand archers from Lucky Hussar, who is already going to be opening up. What are they going to be firing at, though? The choice of target is going to be pretty key. Going to be going after some mounted Uruk host, fairly well armoured, but from that angle actually their shields would not be coming into effect because it's the side that is unshielded. And of course, Loranand archers, as heavy elven archers, I believe they have the 8 missile damage, which is a large amount of damage. So if your shield is not coming into effect, you're relying fully on your armour, it's not really going to go too well even for a unit like the Mountain Uruk host. So some pretty decent kills he has scored on the Misty Mountains relatively early. You can see Isengard and the Misty Mountains on this side, Angmar and Mordor on the other. We'll see how well this goes. A little bit of an expeditionary force from Isengard already moving forward. It's good to see that Gondor is going to be conserving the trebuchets when the blobs start to form. That could be one of the aces in the hole for the defenders. You can see that already Gondor has got most of their army up here. It's the highest point of the settlement, so they were able to move very quickly, very efficiently. Dorwinion moving a little bit slower, but Dorwinion I feel like is also going to try and hold this this lower portion of the city perhaps a little bit longer. And also we can see that there are a few Elvel and Vinegard that did get left behind because of the pathfinding. And they are in and amongst the trolls and the snugger. Not really where a unit of spears wants to be. But you can see here, of course, Angmar with a lot more of their forces revealed. And I did notice as well, of course, we have the Barrow-wights, which are going to be another big factor in this battle because they can sit in a choke point and sort of last for a long time, fairly indefinitely. But with that, I think I will make another little cut because I think the scene has been set. And once again, it's going to be on the attackers to move into a position where they can genuinely assault the defenders. So interestingly enough, Umbar are going to be moving forward, trying to perhaps absorb a bit of the ammunition from the elves, but I'm not sure whether that is all that advisable. As you can see here, the rain of poison arrows coming from the March Wardens of the Wood, falling upon the Corsair infantry, which, to be fair, if Umbar were going to try and absorb ammunition with a unit, they probably would choose the Corsair infantry, but it's unlikely they're really going to be able to do much of anything, especially being as exposed as they are to cavalry charges, and here comes the Loranand mounted company, and a big charge from them is probably going to send the Corsair infantry that is up here routing. And the Isengard Ballista is right there, open for a cav charge as well, which they'd be mad not to engage in that now, the Lothlorien player. Now that he's down here, he's going to have to go for it. The artillery pieces may actually get in the way of the charge here, but if they can kill the Isengard Ballista here, that would be a devastating loss. And perhaps the Isengard player was hoping for a little bit more support from Umbar here, but all Umbar really has nearby are these archers. I think that Ballista is going to just about survive. There's going to be enough men on that Ballista to be able to carry it into battle yet, but that's a big let-off if Isengard are able to get their Ballista out of here. Lothlorien may be feeling as though they can't really expose their cavalry to that sort of punishment for too much longer. Meanwhile, over here you can see the Keldwyn River Patrol getting into a good position here to meet the advance of Angmar, although I would suggest here that Dorwinian's defensive line is maybe a little bit thin to be dealing with a full assault from Angmar's trolls. And spears are not really what you want going up against trolls because they simply do not deal enough damage. They do have the Hammer Guard nearby, however, which is exactly what you would need against trolls. So I'm going to be interested to see actually how Angmar and Mordor decide to approach this, whether they use one of their Great Shield units right from the off, or whether they just go with the trolls and try and smash that rather thin Dorwinian position to splinters very quickly. Meanwhile, a bit of a melee engagement happening over here as Dorwinian meet the flanking force from Isengard, but unfortunately for Isengard it is made up entirely of Dunlending clansmen, the Spear Malus of course applying in the Alvelin infantry. While they don't deal a lot of damage, they are still an accomplished unit of line infantry. They should be able to easily repel units of Isengard militia such as this. So they're going to take this fight, of course, and they've already done a lot of damage here. So you can see the difference between a militia spear and a standard unit of line infantry. This is where line infantry are really in their element. They'll start to crush through those units very, very quickly. And if they wanted to get through here, they maybe should have come into the unit of Bane Guard or something similar. But if they did that, then they know that Lucky Hussar up there with his Loranand archers would have started to shoot them. So a bit of a catch-22 there. What do you do? But so far, I think the defenders can afford to be quite pleased with how this has gone. They haven't really lost anything too significant, but I would still worry potentially about those Dorwinian positions, whether or not they're going to be able to hold on against this kind of force. The Keldwyn River Patrol immediately throwing their javelins in there, right into the guts of the Witch Realm Pikemen and the Witch Realm Blackguard. But Dorwinian are going to need more on the front line than a single unit of Elvelyn Vinegard and Shield Wall. The Orc fellas are going to come forward first, though, so they're not going to go right in with the Trolls and the Great Shield units as I probably would have done. They are going to charge in with the Orc fellas. The Orc fellas are AP, of course, but they are a low-tier Orc axeman, So I'm not really sure if they're going to be enough on their own. They're going to need support relatively quickly, I would think. ERY infantry are coming right around the back, actually, so Isengard really spreading themselves out to the four corners of the map. Kaldwin River Patrol still. The Nandor Glade Guard revealing themselves. They could move in, but their primary thing is doing damage quickly. I'm not sure whether that's what Dorwinian necessarily need here. You can see here the Orc fellas, yeah, they're starting to take some damage here. There's some Morannon infantry also filtering their way towards the front, so obviously Angmar and Mordor wanting to preserve some of their higher tier units for later in the fight. We'll see if that's a decision that pays off. Elvelyn infantry getting closer. There are some archers up on the hill there, some marksmen of Care Andros, although I'm not really sure they have the best of shots to be committing ammunition there, but this is pretty much the only place on the battlefield that has a significant fight. There's still a fight going on over here, of course. You can see here the Elvelyn infantry have lost practically nothing. They've lost only a couple of men in their unit, and they have absolutely mulched these Dunlending clansmen, so some good kills here, taking away some of the attackers' numbers, but for the most part, Dorwinian are having to meet the very heavy advance of Angmar and Mordor, and more Morannon units are making their way to the front. In response to that, the Elvelyn infantry have also come forward, some Uruk-hai infantry also on the front line as well, and unsurprisingly the Kaldwin River Patrol are trying to utilise their javelins to thin the herd a little bit, and there they go. And that should be enough, honestly, to make this attack stall a little bit. It's one of the reasons why I would have utilised the Trolls or the Great Shield units now, is because you would have taken away Dorwinian's ability to do that. And it was only some base infantry, like Trolls absolutely would have gone through there, and certainly the Great Shield units would have as well. It's just a matter of which one you'd want to use, and they would have been used well there. It's early in the fight, but it would have given them a big advantage against the Dorwinian forces, which are still down on this lower layer, so I'd have done it. Kaldwin River Patrol now out of ammunition, charging in, just offering their blades in melee. They're obviously not very good in melee, but they're still going to be there trying to help hold the line as best as they are able. But more significantly, the Nandor Glade Guard are also in melee now, and with their heightened damage and AP, the Orcs are certainly going to struggle a little bit. The Black Guard of Barad-dûr might be making their way to the front line, and it could still work, honestly. It would definitely provoke Dorwinian into committing forward more units. But I'm not sure whether they get through now, because Dorwinian have got enough on the front line and they have enough nearby that they can commit more quickly, and the Hammer Guard would obviously smash units like that into submission very quickly. There's also some Dorwinian units, well, there's the victorious Elvelyn infantry. Some standard Gondor archers also firing away. Here are the Riders of the Golden Wood as well, in a pretty nice position indeed, shooting their Silver Thorns right into the heart of the Misty Mountains force, which are moving forward. Mountaineer coast, Snaga skirmishers, and again the Silver Thorns are here. I'm surprised actually the crossbows are not in a position that they can defend themselves, because they'd be able to do quite a lot of damage quite quickly, but the Silver Thorns doing their thing there, and the Misty Mountains threatening to mount a similar assault on this side as is happening on the other side, but unlike there, where it's two armies, Isengard haven't really committed forward everything yet. Isengard is sort of a bit disparate, spread out throughout the battlefield, so the Misty Mountains will have to go through here alone, and they'll have to go through units like Fountain Guard. You can see that Gondor is actually going to be committing units to try and hold this position over here. Gondor needs to be careful, because if the crossbows get a hold of his higher tier units, he will live to regret that decision. Of course, infantry doing their best, but there's Dorwinian units on the front line, Gondor units, Lothlorians are being shielded, as well they should be. Over here, meanwhile, here come the Black Guard. They are trying to get through now, but the Hammer Guard are going to be here to plug the gap. Although, again, this is perhaps what should have happened sooner, because you can see the chaos that the Black Guard are causing, and this is an area where a mass push could be very, very useful, especially backed up by all of these Orc Maulers and Orc Fellers. That's a lot of AP, which is being brought to bear against primarily Elvelyn units. AP, the primary weakness of them, of course, but you can see here that the further forward the attack is actually pushed, the better shot the Gondorian archers have up on the high ground, so they're going to need to hope that their axemen can hold their nerve a little bit longer, because of course they're going to be absolutely dreadful at taking arrow fire. Nandor Glade Guard victory still seems certain. There's fire arrows coming in as well, hoping. There was a lot of wavering actually going on the front line, so they're perhaps hoping that they can rout these units. The Black Guard, they are now starting to peter out, they're wavering, and they haven't managed to punch all the way through yet. And here go the Orc Maulers starting to rout off, so just about Dorwinian holding on for dear life there. And now they have the Hammer Guard on the front line, so it's going to take a pretty concerted effort indeed to push their way through here. The Witches are probably around here somewhere. That's the Nazgul. Although I would imagine that Angmar has learnt the lessons of the game as it is, and is perhaps trying to save the witches for late on, where of course they could be brutally effective. You can see here the Orc Javelins also doing their thing, so while the attackers are taking a ton of damage from ranged units, the Orc Javelins also trying to do their thing. The Keldwin River Patrol actually routing as a result of those Javelins, of course, not the weakest unit that Dorwinion had on this front line, but nonetheless. Yeah, Dorwinion are going to have to try and, I think, reorganise their line at the minute, because certainly, you know, there was disruption caused by the Blackguard, and now the attackers have got their own Javelins into a position where they can do potentially quite a lot of damage. There's some routing Vanguard as well. Alvelan infantry still on the front line. Where'd the Hammer Guard go? Are they still there somewhere? Yeah, 41 of them. They definitely need to not be in the full view of the Javelins. The Nandor Glade Guard are a perfect target for archers as well. Meanwhile, the Misty Mountains, yeah, and you can see this is a problem that Gondor have basically opened themselves up to. The Misty Mountains doing the right thing by not just charging into melee against Gondor, a combination of Fountain Guard and Gondor infantry. They are instead using their archers, javelins and crossbows, the whole trifecta of ranged units, to punish Gondor for moving into open ground as they have done. And this is a big catch for the attackers as well. You know, a unit of Fountain Guard potentially are going to be dying out here for nothing. And this is obviously the hallmark of a newer player. But yeah, he needs to try and save as many of these as he can, because we've seen how effective the Fountain Guard can be in the past, and it would be a real shame if he were to lose them here. Thoronard Archer's out of ammunition, and well, I mean, the Trebuchet is coming over here now. I'm not sure if, again, there are some potentially good hits you could get, but there's nothing really that I would consider decisive that the Trebuchet can go after at the moment. They're the Kindred of Celeborn, and again, with all of these archers, drawing the Misty Mountains up here would probably be the better choice rather than taking the shots as they are. I mean, it's less ammunition for the late game for the Misty Mountains, but it's good kills that they're getting in the present. Alvelan infantry, Keldwin River Patrol being targeted as well, so a good job being done here, I think, by Mordor and Angmar with their skirmishes. They've definitely been on the receiving end of some pretty hefty punishment from Dorwinion, but they can afford to be fairly pleased with their day's work so far, I think. Alvelan infantry victory is almost certain, so yeah, still these Orc Maulers and Morannon units. You know, the low quality of them all is not really yielding any results in melee against the Dorwinion forces, but it's the ranged units which are getting good value at this point. The Orc Archers and such, going after units like the Keldwin River Patrol. Where'd the Hammer Guard go? They retreat fully? There's Malvellan Marksmen over there. I can't imagine they would have. Are they still on the front line? Are they like on their last legs? That would be most unfortunate if they were. I can't imagine they would have died that quickly, even to Javelins, because it's only Orc Javelins after all. Maybe I'm wrong. Oh, there they are. Still 41 of them left. Hiding behind the Keldwin River Patrol. Still yet more arrow fire coming in. Although being utilised on Orc Archers, this is probably something the attackers will not mind either. You can see right up there on the high ground, Alvelan Marksmen using their ammunition on a low tier unit, rather than doing damage to the infantry blob, which I'm sure they would like to, but they don't really have a choice at this point. They need to try and take away some of Mordor's DPS at range. And even if it's only Orc Archers, it still kills at the end of the day. Still the Nandor Glade Guard. The problem the Nandor Glade Guard have, of course, is they are very fragile to ranged attacks, but in melee, they've certainly been giving the Orcs the business here. And there's still another unit of Glade Guard ready to commit themselves. The Keldwin River Patrol, I think, are trying to get behind some buildings now to prevent that damage. The Hammer Guard and Vine Guard are still nearby as well, but again, it's a bit of a skeleton crew, this, from Dorwinion, all things considered. Uruk-hai crossbowmen now getting into position. What are they going after? Still a very solid frontal defence, as you would imagine. Bolts being loosed into yet more Dorwinion forces. Dorwinion have certainly taken a bit of a beating so far. They've given as good as they've gotten, but the defenders need to hope that they take less damage there. Trebuchet getting a direct hit there on the heavy goblin crossbows. There is a bit of a melee fight going on there as well now. Ooh, hello. Some assassin action going on back here from Lothlorien as both of their cavalry units starting to get into the rear of Umbar and killing off the Umbar general. To be fair, Umbar are probably the faction most of all of the attackers, which can do without their general. But they really need to get into a position here where they can not get cavalry charged. Meanwhile, there are melee engagements happening now. Here are the Kindred of Celeborn shooting into the cave trolls and the cave troll drummers. Trebuchet is not shooting at the moment. Snaga Skirmish is trying to get into a position where they can shoot. I mean, that's a lot of damage that the Kindred of Celeborn are able to do. Like I said, the split shot is something I really, really do enjoy. And again, there is a certain amount of RNG with its shots. They're not too spread out, but you know, it's obviously going to be a bit of chance what you hit with the extra projectiles. But still, those cave trolls are now going to get out of the way. Oof. Over here, though, the heavy goblin infantry is routing, and this is the problem. I mean, the Misty Mountains have moved forward with some infantry, but the problem they do have here, the Snaga are going to try and once again use their ranged units to do the work here, the attackers. But the problem they have is that the heavy goblin infantry that they were using as a front line just weren't resolute enough, and now the Snaga skirmishers are going to pay the price at the end of an Elven Blade. Lord Armed Archer is easily going to be able to kill Snaga skirmishers. And the Gondorians, they're going to chase the goblins down the hill, as well as those Dorwinian forces, but ultimately I don't really fancy the chances of this particular force, because there are Mountain Uruk hosts down here, and the Gondorians were already wavering. A lot of arrow fire still coming in, more Mountain Uruk hosts being committed forward, and there's still ranged units in position here for the Misty Mountains to do their thing. Still those marksmen and Carandros doing their thing, and this is going to be the key, I think. You know, the attackers really are doing quite a good job with their ranged units, getting some good value, and I'm not sure whether the defenders are going to be able to keep their armies together if that keeps up. Meanwhile, it does look as though finally the defences for Dorwinian over here are starting to waver, and with the Barrow Wights on this particular wave of assault as well, it's unlikely that this is going to stop anytime soon. So Dorwinian, they only have a single unit of Nandor Glade Guard here on the front line, and that is not going to be enough against this force. You either go all in or you retreat at this point, I think. And I would honestly be in favour of retreating, because that defence over there is not likely to last too much longer, although to be fair, Gondor is sending down an awful lot of reinforcements as well as Dorwinian. I mean, I'm all for being aggressive, but eventually, as with most siege battles, as soon as one defence crumbles, the rest can surely follow, like dominoes. And I'm not sure whether the defenders have really taken that into account here, but Dorwinian's still trying their best to stop this attack. It's primarily Barrow Wights and again lower tier units. I say that, the Trolls of Angmar are also on their way forward now. Keldon River Patrol is on the way over here, but I don't think they're going to get here in time. The Hammer Guard is also here, but even them, with their might, is not going to be enough here, I don't think. Some more Orc fellas also being committed forward. Attrition is going to take its toll here, I believe. The Javelins, what are they actually going to be able to hit from here? I mean, they are going to be able to get into that blob, but it's not going to be too devastating, I wouldn't have thought. The Hammer Guard, I think, are going to try and retreat at this point. Over on this side, meanwhile, Gondor's reinforcements have, I think, forced the Misty Mountains into being maybe a little bit more proactive. Those Snaga skirmishers taking some damage there from the split shot. The heavy goblin crossbows, though, have surely done an excellent job here. I think Gondor has been guilty a little bit of playing into the Misty Mountains' hands here, allowing the Misty Mountains to utilise their javelins, but especially their crossbows, to good effect on the Gondorian infantry. Being aggressive is all well and good, but you need to make sure that you're not just going to get shot when you do it. What do we have here? Bit of a choke point fight here as both Lothlorien and Dorwinian close in on the joint Umbar and Isengard attack. Poison arrows flowing into this assault. Balaketh marksmen and Corsair infantry taking it on the chin, though. Spears of the Wood and Alvelin infantry doing well against the Belagaya and Uruk-hai on the front line. Over time, however, I would expect that to reverse. I would expect the attackers to be able to get through there. And I think at this point the defenders are going to be trying to move backwards. The Isengard Ballista getting a hit right into the centre of that unit of Gondor Spearmen, getting 10 kills in one fell swoop. The poison arrows continuing to be loosed into the attackers. Balaketh marksmen are shaken, obviously, that morale debuff coming into effect there. Let's see, of course, Gondor infantry, but they're routing and broken. There's still some reserves over here that could be committed, some Alvelin infantry. That Isengard Ballista, though, is doing tons of damage, and honestly, if the defenders didn't learn their lesson by the first volley, then they deserve to take the casualties that they are currently taking. That choke point is not in immediate danger of being taken, so there's no need to station men right there just to be shot by the ballista. Meanwhile, heavy goblin spearman taking some damage there, and you know the archers up on the highest point of the settlement have been doing damage to the attackers wherever they have been. But you kind of need that to happen if you're the defenders, whereas the attackers have also been able to make good use of their skirmishes thus far. Mountaineer at coast, fighting hard on the front line against the Gondor infantry with the support of those Snaga. And it's a case of numbers here, the Gondor infantry being over, especially, well, the proximity of the trolls certainly not helping, the cave troll drummers buffing the morale as well. Are Dorwinians still holding on over here? No, they are not. This defence has crumbled, as you would expect. When the Trolls of Angmar came forward against basic spears, the Nandor Glade Guard at that point were largely killed, so the one danger to the Trolls already dealt with. And there we go. Angmar and Mordor have their way on to this layer of the settlement, and now they should be able to move in and attack some defences from the rear. So it's going to be interesting to see how they make the most of that particular opening. What have we got over here? There's a unit of Balaketh marksmen which appear to be trying to shoot the Lothlorien cavalry on the retreat, but this isn't going to go too well for them, I wouldn't have thought. They are going to get a point-blank vault. Well, actually, no, they were going after the mounted company. So this unit of Balaketh marksmen is almost certainly going to be picked off here by the Lothlorien riders. Cycle charging in and out with lancers and very powerful horse archers is only going to yield one result there. Meanwhile, Umbar and Isengard. Isengard's ballista still trying to make the most of those very densely packed positions, and that Isengard ballista has almost certainly already paid for itself. Not necessarily kills on really powerful units, but it's managed to pick holes in the defence. Over here on the front line, however, they're not really making the most of this opportunity they have here, the attackers, because they're not reinforcing this front line at all. And the Elves and the Elvelen are really doing a good job at picking apart this joint Umbar-Isengard assault from the front of the settlement here. Perhaps they're hoping they can save some manpower by getting Angmar, Mordor and the Misty Mountains to do the dirty work. Or perhaps they're just hoping that they can do enough damage with the ballista and then move forwards. I'm not really sure. Regardless, a silver lining to all that bombardment that the defenders are taking. Heavy goblin spears are moving in here on the front line. We also have the marksmen of Caer Andros, a good unit in melee. But I'm not sure whether they're going to be enough to reverse Gondor's fortunes over on this side of the settlement. They're trying their best, certainly. There's yet more units coming out here. Black Uruks of the Mountains also pouring forwards. To be fair, on flat terrain like this, it'll be more difficult to utilise the crossbows, but they've got enough room, I would say, to get into a position where they can still get them into a place where they can fire. Heavy goblin archers as well. Here come the Lorinand archers. I mean, still, the defence is still being mounted over here, and the Misty Mountains still meeting resistance as they try and move forwards in the same manner that Mordor and Angmar already have done. In come the Lorinand archers. Heavy elven archers, of course, strong in melee, just like the marksmen of Caer Andros, so that may be just archers they're facing here, but not just any archers for the goblins of the Misty Mountains. Black Uruks of the Mountains moving in. I mean, that's the sort of unit that they will need on the front line at this point, meeting sword to sword with the humans and the elves. I would still question whether they would be as strong as these two units, but combined with the numbers the Misty Mountains have here, this is exactly what they're going to need, I think, to finally put an end to the last vestiges of resistance down here. And as if that wasn't enough, the heavy goblin crossbows have been able to get into a position where they can shoot, and they have got a nice opening there right into the marksmen and the Lorinand units. So that's exactly what they needed. Very depleted units also just filtering their way into the fight. Only a matter of time before they make their way through there, I'm sure. Meanwhile, here we can see the trolls, so, you know, in the end... Is that the trebuchet? It is. So in the end, the trolls from Angmar do bail out Umbar and Isengard to a certain extent. The Balaketh marksmen still shooting the blades of the wood on the retreat, and both units of Angmar trolls going up against the Elvelen infantry, and the Citadel Guard are here, to be fair. Citadel Guard with their AP. Very nice indeed. But I don't think they're in big enough numbers at this point to really bother the trolls. So Angmar doing a good job here supporting his allies, but now will his allies reciprocate that by moving forward and claiming this terrain? Yes, they have a lot of arrow fire they're going to have to wade through, but I think it's the least they can do for them. Dunheim Shield Guard are there. Trolls of Angmar starting to fall away, actually, at the hands of the Trebuchet. Bit of collateral damage from the Gondor Trebuchet there. Hitting that building. The Trolls weren't taking damage from the Trebuchet, they were taking damage from the Citadel Guard, I would imagine. Blades of the Wood also getting in there, so yeah, the Trolls actually need to get out of there because they're starting to take a bit of damage and they could still be very useful in the late game. But yeah, the Gondor Trebuchet is in position. But it's not really doing much of anything, and again, another sign that it is a newer player is the fact that he is not using the flaming shot on his artillery when dealing with enemy infantry, because of course that deals more splash damage, which you really want when you're going after infantry. The only reason you'd use normal shot is to try and snipe out enemy artillery, which you don't really want to do with trebuchets anyway. They are more accurate now, but still it's not their primary function really. Lorenand archers still holding the line here against the heavy goblins, but it's only a matter of time before they fall away, since Snaga skirmishers are in position throwing their jabbies, and it's going to be the end of them. Meanwhile, Gondor setting up a strong position down here. How much ammunition do Mordor and Angmar really have left? I mean, they certainly have the Witchers still alive. But this layer of the settlement is almost certainly going to be fully claimed by the attackers any moment now. Just, well, there's one Blade of the Wood fighting these Uruk-hai over here. And honestly, with the Trolls gone, that's a good opportunity to retreat the Citadel Guard. 25 of them only, but they're a good enough unit to the point where that could make a big difference. There's a lot of strong units up here in the top of the settlement as well. Will it be enough? We can only wait and see. Some Helval and Hammer Guard just holding their ground over here. What is this? There's a couple of units just coming in here to try and attack this shield wall. Interestingly enough, it doesn't look like the Gondorians are actually fighting back, so he's just getting jabbed. Just some Gondor spearmen in formation. And then obviously the reinforcements would come if a big assault happened, the Hammer Guard in particular. What have we over here? I think the cavalry is down here somewhere, the Lothlorien cavalry? Isn't it? Nope, doesn't look like it is. Just some routing units. The Marks of Carandros came back from routing actually, so they could get into the back of the Misty Mountains army potentially. Whatever happened to the cavalry? Well, there's the Riders of the Golden Wood. And there's the Lorenard Mounted Company, so there's my answer. Umbar still perhaps lagging a little bit further behind, really not wanting to go into the position in front of Austin ERY to open themselves up to those arrows. Bit of a lull in proceedings here as the attackers decide how they should proceed. Some Helvelan infantry routing, but finally the Misty Mountains are able to kill off the last of the elf resistance in this corner of the settlement, and now they're going to be able to move forwards as well, although only as a single army only. You would imagine that their shelf life is going to be shorter than the Mordor Angmar assault, which is currently happening on the other side. We'll see. Still that Lothlorien cavalry though, which could still be a big factor. A well-placed charge can really make all the difference. We're still having ranged attacks happening down here. Corsair crossbowmen moving in. So still, the attackers attempting to utilise their ranged units to soften the enemy up before moving in. But the Corsair crossbows advancing into the teeth of Elven archers, maybe not the best idea. Very much glass cannons, the Corsair crossbows. But of course it is entirely dependent on the defenders actually wanting to expend their ammunition on the Corsair crossbows. It may be they've already used up too much ammunition already. Which would be a big problem, I think. Because this front line is going to start to take some pretty horrendous damage from unopposed crossbowmen. We'll see though. Meanwhile, What will the Misty Mountains do? Well, I know what the Misty Mountains will want to do. They'll want to get their archers and crossbows into position once again to give Gondor some of the same treatment that they had on the outermost layer. And again, the Misty Mountains probably running a little bit low on ammunition at this point, considering the amount they've already used. But another unit of Fountain Guard, open for assault, Citadel Guard as well. Marksman of Carandros, there's really not a unit there that you wouldn't want to try and shoot to death. And I would be, again, Gondor needs to learn their lesson here and not just let the Misty Mountains do that, whether that's to attack into the Misty Mountains, which is very risky, or to retreat and try and set up some sort of ambush up here where you let the attackers in and then sort of move in and form up a defensive position. Remains to be seen. Rotting meat, so the trebuchet must be out of ammunition already. The rotting meat is not really going to be too useful down here. I mean, if it can actually get kills if you score a direct hit with it, but only one at a time, which is obviously not necessarily the most useful thing in the world. Another hit. Mordor sending forward some lower end units as well. Of course, their crossbows getting closer to get a better hit, and unsurprisingly at this point I think the defenders have finally learned their lesson and they're not just going to stand in full view of the attackers' most deadly skirmishes. At least they have in some places. The heavy goblin crossbows may very well be about to tee off into Gondor once more. Meanwhile, another unit of Keldwyn River Patrol over here. There are Barrow-wights down there, but I can understand why Dorwinion is not shooting the Barrow-wights, because it's often a bit of a fool's errand to try and shoot the Barrow-wights to death. Those are very depleted Orc Javelins. They're not necessarily getting their shots with the best angles either, so maybe not the end of the world. March Wardens of the Wood moving forwards. Let's see here. I mean, over here, the Misty Mountains, once again, I think Gondor is just going to let the Misty Mountains do this, which, more and more, it's looking like this could be the errors which cost the defenders the battle, honestly, because they cannot afford to lose manpower like this, especially not from units like Citadel Guard, Fountain Guard, and even the Marksmen of Carandros. They're good enough in melee that losing them is a bit of a tragedy in and of itself. Looks like the Gondorian player has learnt his lesson, albeit after a few volleys. What's happening here? So it does look as though Isengard and Umbar are finally gathering a bit more of their courage. They're going to be moving forward. I mean, they have moved forward previously, but they then seem to just sort of stop all of a sudden and not commit any more reinforcements to it, which led to predictable results in that their assault kind of collapsed and Angmar had to bail them out. But there isn't really much in the way of archers to prevent them from doing this at this point, I don't think. The defenders still have a decent amount. I mean, the Morroquendi bow should still have ammunition, surely. Or maybe they were some of the poison arrows that were being used and they pulled out their glaives. I mean, there's some decent units up here, but I don't think there's the amount of quality that's going to be needed for the defenders to go on to actually win this fight. I feel as though the attackers have just been too good with their ranged units so far. What have we got here? March Wardens of the Wood charging downhill. Well, they're skirmishers that were trying to move in. Probably the javelins, I would imagine, but at this point the March Wardens of the Wood are of course just going to be mobbed by Barrow-wights and Snaga, and that will be the end of them. Javelins being thrown. Only 26 of them. If they still have a decent amount of ammo over time, they could do a lot of damage to those Gondor spearmen. And that's yet another example of the attackers making very, very good use of their skirmishers indeed. There's still those trolls as well. There's still the Witchers, which honestly is the most worrying thing for the defenders, to be honest. If the Witchers get one good shot off here, then it's going to be all over for them, really. That will be something I don't believe they will be able to recover from. Riders of the Golden Wood still over here. Lothlorien Mounted Company also still doing their thing, slowly chewing away at the back ranks of Isengard and Umbar. Whether they'll be able to do enough damage in this way to make up for some of the losses that they've taken elsewhere, I'm not so sure. Especially seeing as the Ballista crew is over here, but I would imagine the Ballista at this point has run its ammo supply dry. So not the most high-profile kills, but kills nonetheless. There are actually some crossbows in there as well, which if they still have ammunition, that is a worthwhile kill indeed. Kai still alive. Yeah, doing a very good job here with the cavalry is Lothlorien. And they're going to need to if they're going to have any joy in this fight moving forward, I would imagine. The mass of those horse archers, of course, making up for their lower charge. Lorenan Mounted Company, of course, have got a very nice charge indeed. Armour piercing to boot. Heavy Goblin Spears moving forward, perhaps trying to provoke some sort of reaction from Gondor. Gondor would be wise not to take this bait, because what the Misty Mountains clearly wants to do, I think, is to draw Gondor forwards into a position where they can once again start teeing off onto their infantry with the crossbows and archers, which is the last thing they want. Yeah, you can see here, he's stopping right there. He's casting his line. Will the bait work? Meanwhile, over here, another unit of Orc Javelins, and I feel a bit for Gondor here, because Gondor has been bullied, rather, by the attacking skirmishers at various points throughout this battle, and it's still happening, really. And the more manpower the defenders lose, the more likely an attacking victory seems. There are Gondor archers here which are trying to do their thing, but they don't necessarily have the best of shots. And javelins just have better DPS than archers anyway, certainly basic archers like that. Kindred of Caliborn, I think they used up all their ammunition, I think rather unwisely on the trolls. They perhaps should have waited for a nice infantry blob, because they have now pulled out their 2 blades. Still a bit of a very, very slow movement here from Isengard and Umbar. Let's see what's going on here. Heavy Goblin Spears move forward. I think, you know, they realised here that Gondor wasn't going to take the bait, so they are instead going to move forward. What have we got going on over here? I think he saw the unit that was routing. Indeed, the Snaga skirmishers are over here utilising their javelins. If the marksmen of Caer Andros were wise, they would charge in there and kill those Snaga off, because they could do that at the very least. It doesn't look like they're going to do that. Instead, it looks as though they're just going to be skewered to death instead. Most unfortunate for them. Cave Troll Drummers still doing their thing. Blackarooks the mountains moving forward. Not a huge amount of quality in this Misty Mountains army, it must be said. But it's certainly done the business so far. And now that the Misty Mountains are moving forward, that is the green light for the other factions also to put some pressure on. Because the Fountain Guard, the Citadel Guard, the Marksmen of Caer Andros, all together they should be able to throw back this Misty Mountains assault, especially with Nimlothi and Honor Guard in support. They need some attacks happening from the other side as well. Unfortunately, it does look as though Mordor are going to oblige, although albeit with a very token effort indeed. The Orc Archers are really not going to be able to make it through the Gondor Spears, even as depleted by the Javelins as they are. Guardians of Khan Doom are down there as well. That is the one black mark I would have against the attackers here. They haven't been that courageous in this fight. You know, the first sign of danger and they've sort of ducked their heads down under cover. They haven't really sort of taken the bull by the horns at any point in this battle yet. But maybe soon. Meanwhile, this cavalry squashing those Snaga. Not many marksmen left. I mean, certainly if I were the defenders, the Misty Mountains would be the faction I would try and focus down with the cavalry, because they're the ones which are certainly looking like they are most damaged. They're also the most isolated. Some rear charges from the cavalry, some committals of some elite units on the front line to stop their advance, and you're in a good position here, I think. Lorenan warriors with the AP. Yeah, you know, this Misty Mountains army is not doing so well. There are elements of it which are already breaking. Lango trying his best to keep up a large-scale assault, but he needs some assistance from his allies, really. His allies need to start moving in as well. Like I've said before, sometimes the decision is taken out of your hands, and when your ally has moved in, you too need to move in. Otherwise you'll just be letting them die for no reason, and then you'll have to face more foes later. Over here, Morannon infantry have also been committed forward, so at the very least Mordor are making a bit of an effort. It's not a huge force, but it's still something at the very least. Snaga Stalkers are here, Guardians of Khan Doom troll drummers as well. Oh, there's some Orc Maulers moving across here too, but I think they're maybe just biding their time waiting for the opportunity to use something like the Blackwatch Legion perhaps to try and break the back of this defence and then flood in with the trolls. That would probably be how I would play it. Still though, I think Isengard and Umbar have been very guilty. No, now the Trebuchet crew is counter-attacking into them. That really does go to show how passive Isengard and Umbar are being, which they've taken casualties, but most of these have been at range, I think. And you can see the way that the bodies extend all the way back to here. You know, they've only really been involved in one genuine line battle, and they sent forward an initial force and then never sent any reinforcements forward, so maybe the cavalry charges had them a little bit spooked, and that's why they didn't send forward a ton of units. But even so, they're now moving forward with some Bane Guard and some Balagar pikes, which is good to see. But yeah, we'll see if their passivity is bad for their allies. The Fountain Guard doing their thing, of course. Heavy Goblin crossbows in melee, the last place they really want to be. They've already certainly done their job in this battle, though, but at this point they are going to be cleaved in twain by some Elven Heavy Axeman. Kindred of Caliborn are also over here in case things need a little shove in the right direction. They will be committed to melee, I'm sure. Whatever happened to the Cav? It's got to be around here somewhere, surely. Oh, I think it's over here. Indeed it is. Pestering the back lines of Mordor and Angmar's side of things. Going after some Blackguard and some Morannon infantry. And certainly towards the end of this fight, I would imagine that the cavalry will have racked up a very impressive kill count indeed. Because Lucky Hussar has definitely chosen his targets wisely. He's gone after units which can't really defend themselves from charges like this. And he's done a very good job thus far, although his manpower on horseback is now starting to run out, as you would expect. And this could be the end of it, honestly. He's lost micro on one of his Lorenan mounted company. He takes a charge in the Morannon infantry. And that's going to be the end, I think, of them. The Nazgul are over here. So that's just going to leave the Riders of the Golden Wood still very healthy because of their very high stats and multiple HP, of course, but not as deadly off the charge as the Lorenan mounted company. So perhaps a bit of a tragic loss there. Meanwhile, here comes the Blackwatch Legion, so they sense that the time is now. Elvellyn marksmen are going to filter down to try and stop this advance from the Blackwatch Legion. I think they're going to be successful, actually. The Blackwatch Legion not really making a great deal of ground. The hill, the extreme hill, is perhaps also helping the defenders, making it a little bit trickier for the Blackwatch Legion to really make any sort of progress. Further down the hill, Guardians of Khan Doom. Here come the Keldrin River Patrol doing their thing as well. Morannon infantry and Barrow-wights taking it on the chin. And of course javelins, because of the very low mass of the Barrow-wights, the javelins send them flying each and every time. The Hammer Guard is also loitering within 10. But yeah, the Elvellyn marksmen here, looks like they are going to be enough to stop the mass push. They're obviously not great in melee, but that's not really the purpose behind them here. Snaga Stalkers are routing as well, so they need some more quality on the front line here. Orc Fellas maybe not exactly what the Doctor ordered, but the Trolls most certainly would be, which should provoke the reaction from the reinforcements they've got over here, especially the Hammer Guard, because they will be exactly the sort of thing you want to see against Trolls. Gondor, meanwhile, have managed to throw back the Misty Mountains, albeit a very nice sort of making the most of this situation. The Misty Mountains, they've been forced back, but this of course gives them that angle with their skirmishes that they always wanted, and now the Heavy Goblin Archers are going to be able to get some nice shots off onto the Gondorians that chase them too far. And it's the marksmen of Caer Andros as well. And still the Gondorians in full view of the Misty Mountain skirmishes. They've done this a lot in this battle, and it could end up costing them quite dearly, because the Misty Mountains, as weakened as they may be, are still standing. Don't know if they've got their crossbows out, so they should still have some ammunition. Gobbo infantry, Gobbo archers, in position. Yeah, I don't know, I mean, I'm not sure the Misty Mountains honestly can force their way through here at this point, but they can certainly make themselves a nuisance. And if they can hold the attention of elite units like Kindred and the Nimlothian Honor Guard, then it will be certainly worth it. Finally though, it looks as though Umbar and Isengard are going to be moving forward in a more genuine capacity. The Corsair crossbows being thrown back though. The Adunheim Shield Guard on the front line now as well. They need something more. Like I said, you can't afford to engage piecemeal like this because it will cost you. Their reinforcements are too strung out here, and the defenders have got a very nice engagement on them. The Adunheim Shield Guard may be on the front line, the Bane Guard are here also. But there's nothing here that will really do a lot of damage, particularly to the Elven units, which are currently holding the line. And if they need it, there's always the AP from the Lorenard Warriors, and now there's some assistance from the Morriquendi Pikes of Dorwinion as well. Which is going to make life very difficult for them moving forwards here. The Uruk-hai Pikemen's presence will be needed on the front line to prevent them just being kept at arm's length. The Adunheim Shield Guard at the very least won't rout, which is something. I don't know. Balakathak's Guard back down here, Moran on infantry. Yeah, I mean, the Nazkai are still here. They've taken a little bit of damage, presumably from ranged units, but maybe the cavalry as well. Here we go. This is a little bit more like it from the attackers on this side, really throwing forward everything they have. A lot of might being brought to bear. The Hammer Guard and the Wards of the White Tower are in here, but it may not be enough. Huge amount of mass. This is probably the most successful of the mass pushes we've seen so far, if only because it is forcing the defenders back slowly but surely. There isn't really a great deal of reinforcements though, so this is a bit of a gamble, because if this does end up failing, then Mordor and Angmar could be not long for this battle, honestly. And they're trying to plug the gaps here. Elvelyn infantry coming in, but the trolls are really the problem here. There's a lot of pikes on the front line as well. Morriquendi pikes are on their way over, Nimlothian Honor Guard, which is perhaps the opportunity that the Misty Mountains were waiting for. They may as well throw everything forward now as well that the elites are gone. Try and make something happen on the other side. Still trolls are over here. A really chaotic fight. There's some Hammer Guard as well. They've taken a lot of damage actually. The Barrow Wights are in here, which of course this is the problem when Angmar have a somewhat successful mass push. They are really not, they are able to consolidate their gains very easily with a unit of Barrow Wights, because Barrow Wights, it's so difficult to get rid of them. I think maybe the defenders will just about be able to hold them at bay, although this is where things could turn pretty ugly for the defenders. Jean-Baptiste has managed to get his Witchers into position. He could get a lot of friendly fire here though, to be fair. I mean, it's a risky proposition to shoot when the blob is this chaotic. Yeah, and he did. He got a fair amount of friendly fire there. Primarily he did kill enemies, but he did get quite a lot of friendly fire there. But I think at this point it is worth it, just because if they can pour forwards, it's going to be enough. So one shot, and now he's going to retreat. And that should be enough to give Mordor and Angmar the impetus they need to keep moving forwards. The goblins still just sort of hanging around on the periphery, not yet ready to commit themselves forward to the main fight. Over here on the front, while things are looking a little bit grim for them on the other side, well, things are starting to look a little bit grim for them on the front as well, the defenders. Balakath Axguard, now we can see the Black Númenóreans coming forward in force, backed up by a good amount of Uruk-hai. Now I'm not sure whether they're going to be able to hold on from the front here, the defenders. They're going to give it their all, but I'm not sure whether it's going to be enough. Lorenard Warriors pulling back. There's still some Morriquendi bows over there. They can hold this line for quite some time with those pikes and spears and Elvelyn units, but the real issue they have is they're going to be units pouring in at this point. Riders of the Goldenwood charging into the Morannon infantry, trying their best, but at this point they're feeding on scraps. They need to get a decisive blow rather than playing around with those depleted units. I can understand trying to get them out of the way. They're going to need to do so quickly. Defenders don't have the luxury of time at this point, which is going to be able to fire a devastating volley, I think, into the heart of this defence, into the Karas-Galadon's Guardians. Devastating blows this from the Witchers. As I always feared, I did notice that when the final wave was underway, the assault on the final position of the settlement, that it didn't look like the defenders had too much in the way of ammunition left. And indeed, that has proven to be the case. As a result, some of the conservation that Umbar and Isengard did is not looking so foolish now. It is the sort of thing which can work against you, though. I feel as though the Misty Mountains, Angmar and Mordor deserve a lot of credit for how well they've managed to use their skirmishes in this fight. Back come the Witches again. They could shoot into the side of the Citadel Guard here. And that will bring about the end of this defence. I mean, Mordor and Angmar are looking very beleaguered at this point. There's not much of them left. There's enough of them that they can cause enough disruption for Umbar, Isengard and the Misty Mountains to then flood into the settlements and take it, I would imagine. Another shot coming in there. Yeah, nice decisive blow there on the Lorinand warriors as well. Again, for anyone who dislikes the Witches, I'm sure that this is absolutely horrifying. But it is what it is, and the defenders did not have anything to answer the Witches with in the late game, and if you're facing Angmar, you always need to be aware of them. I do believe Angmar are maybe, they are one of the easier factions to play in the game. They're a very straightforward faction to play, whether on the field or in a siege battle. But even so, that's hardly the fault of anyone who's playing as Angmar. They just need to do their thing. And now they're starting to wrap up the line. So this was happening to them earlier. Now a bit of payback for Umbar and Isengard as they move forward. The damaging Black Númenóreans backed up by the solid Uruk-hai pike line. And more, the chances of the defenders pulling some miraculous comeback is starting to ebb ever more quickly away. What have we here? Marchwardens of the Wood. Lorinand warriors trying their best, but once again, I think that the crossbows were firing at point blank. But they have now been engaged in melee, but their superior numbers mean they should actually be able to win this melee fight. Not often the Uruk-hai crossbows can say that about themselves. Lorinand warriors charging forward, trying to do some damage to the heavy goblin spears. I'd be amazed if Lothlorien didn't have the highest kill count by the end of this game. I'm also amazed, quite honestly, that we haven't seen any rangers on the defence, which may also have been a bit of a crippling omission from them. Lothlorien in particular, with their Keren Amroth rangers, that's so much damage. At least the Athelian rangers you would want, though. Like, rangers on the defence is so good for thinning the herd, and that's exactly what you need in a situation like this. I mean, the Witches have been dealt with. The Witches have been mobbed by... Oh, there they are. What have they been doing this whole time? I haven't seen them in position on a choke point. So what have they been doing? I mean, it could be at this point that Angmar and Mordor do fall apart, but I still feel as though the damage they've already done is fairly terminal. Having a look at the percentage of kills, I mean, it is dead even, to be fair. I suppose it's not impossible that the defenders could turn this around, but I just feel as though, again, the attackers do tend to be able to run away with it a little bit in the late game. Again, these Keren Amroth Rangers, do they still have ammo? They should do. I haven't seen them at any point in this battle. I might just be completely blind. But I mean, they can't have been shooting into one of the main choke points then. So did they use their ammunition earlier on? Maybe down there, from up on the hill? Very confusing. Meanwhile, at this point the Misty Mountains are throwing everything forward, trying to do their thing. The crossbows still have a bit of ammo. Reloading. The only thing standing between them and getting into the settlement is this one unit of Lorinand warriors, really, because those 10 Fountain Guard are not going to be able to stop this amount of goblins from just flooding forth and over them. The troll drummers keeping them in line as well. There's some Marchwardens of the Wood on the front line as well, so yeah, I mean, Isengard and Umbar are going to have to be the ones to win this battle for the attackers at this point. There's some Nazkai still, a lot of Black Númenóreans. Here comes some Orc fodder. Going to try and start wrapping up the line from the other side. There goes the Misty Mountains General, stabbed by an axe. It's got to be uncomfortable. In comes the fodder. Naru Naaru Sentinels. Defeat is a distinct possibility. That's quite interesting. How is that happening? Kindred of Caliborn have committed themselves to Frontline, which is a fairly substantial addition. I mean, it could be that the sheer skill of the elves is enough to see them over the line here, which would be amazing. I was looking for all the life of me then that the attackers were going to run away with it as Mordor and Angmar continue to bludgeon their way through and fry their way through in the case of the Witches. But Lothlorien have been able to turn it around here, and Lucky Hussar deserves a great deal of credit for how he's managed to do this. It's only a matter of time. Well, you can see here the Riders of the Goldenwood, they're doing their best here to try and deal with these crossbows. The crossbows, of course, are still a very real problem to deal with. If they can shut them down, then finally they will be free of the bolts that have done them so much damage so far in this battle. They need to charge back in as quickly as they're able. Of course, crossbows do have a relatively long reload time. But the Misty Mountains struggling to get through here, actually, and with the addition of those Morroquendi bows, I think the Misty Mountains will be stopped dead in their tracks on this choke point. Firing at point blank. Here comes the Troll Drummer, going absolutely berserk. There's not many of them left. I mean, they're still trolls. They're not brilliant in combat, but trying to do the best to help their little brothers over here. What's going on over here? So yeah, more and more of the units that were victorious over there heading over to help out against Umbar and Isengard. Kindred of Caliborn continuing to rip and tear their way through. There's the Dorwinian General as well, who was part of what unit? The Glade Master. So they were on the field. They must have been up here this whole time, and they have now joined the fray. And with a unit of that quality, and you know, the Karos Galadhon's Guardians may have taken a shot from the Witchers, but it was only one shot. They're still very much alive. Here comes some more Morroquendi pikes. I mean, Umbar and Isengard need to get in and around the defences over here. Like they're just engaging from the front, and that's playing into the hands of the elves. If they can surround them, then they'll be able to do the business. But I'm not sure they're really going about this in the right way. The Uruk-hai pikemen are trying to move forward now, trying to take advantage of a gap that's here. But the gap is going to be closed almost immediately by this, albeit heavily depleted unit of Morroquendi pikes, but it's still going to be a unit they have to deal with before they can then try and surround the other units. The Glade Masters are doing their best, the Kindred are doing their best, but at this point it is looking more and more like the numbers of Umbar and Isengard, as well as some support from Mordor, is going to be enough to win this fight over here. I think there are some Nazgûl still over here. Indeed there are, only 4 of them. But at this point I think Lothlorien sees the fact that if they don't send all their reinforcements over to try and stop Umbar, they are going to lose. This force over here will quite happily be able to mulch its way through the heavy goblins, but all of them will still be required, so they can't afford to send anything from over here. These Fountain Guard are just sort of static, which leads me to believe the Gondor player may have crashed, but with only a single unit of 10 Fountain Guard, it's not really going to be too decisive anyway. There are the Riders of the Goldenwood, who must have gotten a quite disgusting kill count throughout this entire fight. Some rear charges from them could be absolutely vital. The Morroquendi Glade Masters are here. Where did the Kindred of Caliborn go? There they are. Preventing a surround on the Karos Galadhon's Guardians, and they're going to be able to now slice their way through the Morannon Infantry with the support of the Cairn Amroth Rangers. Can Lothlorien pull this out of the bag? I'm rooting for them at this point, because I think Lucky Hussar deserves it with how he's managed to play with his cavalry and with his defences in this battle so far. He's done a magnificent job, I have to say. Dorwinian trying their best to support them with what they have left as well, and I mean, the Glade Masters at this point would be the strongest single unit left on the field. Well, the Nazkai have got more men in the unit, so it probably would be them at this point. Here come some Loranand warriors, only 22 of them, but again, 22 men at this point of that quality could be enough to turn this battle heavily in Lothlorien's favour. The Troll Drummers are on the front line. They probably won't last too long against the best units that Lorien have to offer. Where'd the Nazgûl go? They've got to be over here still, right? There's only 4 of them left. Will that be decisive as well? I mean, 4 Nazgûl. Nazgûl are notoriously difficult to bring down, and considering they still have the support of Nazkai. Here come the Riders of the Golden Wood. That's a bold charge in there, because there are still pikes from both Umbar and Isengard left here, but they're trying to charge the Nazkai, and I can certainly see why. More of their cavalry dying off there, but some decisive charges could be exactly what the Doctor ordered at this point. Cairn Amroth Rangers are still very healthy, to be honest with you. and with their two-handed blades, they're going to be pretty good in melee, much like the Wardens of Elos Tyrion are with their dual wielding. Defeat seems certain for Isengard as they continue to try and fight. How are the Misty Mountains getting along? I mean, I can't imagine this situation is getting any better. Indeed, it's gotten a whole lot worse for the Misty Mountains because their army has collapsed. They only really had heavy goblins left alive at the end, so perhaps that's not too surprising. This, of course, will free up a unit of Morroquendi bows and Lorenard warriors to head over and support the front line. So yeah, I think Lothlorien, they're going to be able to do it. There goes the Dorwinian General, the Nazkai doing their thing there. So the Glade Masters fighting hard, but ultimately, you know, with only 10 of them left, I think they're about to fall away as well. What a fight here in the late game. I think are the Nazgul in here? They are. There's only 4 of them, but I mean, 4 Nazgul, that could be enough, and those Morroquendi bows and Lorenard warriors I think are going to be sorely needed over here. The Riders of the Golden Wood charge in, but unfortunately they charge right into the front of the Naru Naru Sentinels, so that's pretty much going to be the end of them. But you can't really argue with their performance. I imagine that they probably were the most damaging single unit on the field, to be honest. The Glade Masters are still fighting hard, only 7 of them left, supported by the Pikes and Warriors. There are the Kindred of Celeborn, getting themselves free of an engagement. Here come the Morroquendi bows, 66 Morroquendi bows. Yeah, I can't see the attackers pulling this out at this point. There are still 3 Riders of the Golden Wood as well. They're being very bold by charging into pikes, but I mean, there's not really anything else they can do at this point. They have to contribute somehow. Marchwardens of the Wood, still 10 of them as well. Yep, it's going to be the end, I feel. The Nazgul, only 2 of them, so they're getting poked to death by the Guardians and the Rangers. And here come the Morroquendi bows. So Lothlorien and Dorwinian just about staying standing at the end, in spite of the attackers' good play with their skirmishers. Perhaps there's a case for saying they simply didn't have enough infantry. No, perhaps they brought too many skirmishers in this case and ended up paying the price for that, because when it came down to brass tacks, when it came down to trying to make the final assault with all the infantry, initially it was looking quite good with Mordor and Angmar, but in the end they just didn't have the might to see themselves over the line, especially against the Lothlorien forces. Did very, very well, and it's a very easy thing for me to say that Lucky Hussar deserves to be the MVP of this match. Again, like Umbar and Isengard, maybe a little bit too passive, but ultimately I think it was a matter of compositions here. I can only imagine that's how this managed to get away from the attackers, because they had the defenders banged to rights then. Like, they had them right where they wanted them, they just didn't have the infantry to see themselves over the line. Lorenard warriors getting into a good position here. There's nothing really of Gondor left alive. They have those 10 Fountain Guard, which are technically still alive, but I assume the player must have crashed. And then it's nothing but Morroquendi and some upper end units from Lothlorien. In come the warriors. This is going to be the end of the Nazkai, and there goes the Isengard General. Well, there are still 2 Nazgul, but I mean they don't stand a chance against all these units. A very, very competitive game though. Very glad that this one was sent to me. It's a good map as well. I mean, it can get a little bit grindy and choke pointy, but the defenders took the front foot, and to be fair, they nearly paid the price for taking the front foot as aggressively as they did. But still, a very well fought battle, I think, all round. I think Lothlorien deserves particular credit for how they were able to go about their business, and that's going to be the end of the Nazgul. So very well fought, and in the end, we have a 4% victory for the defenders. Very, very impressive indeed. And there we go. Built on the back of the Elven Might there, the defenders able to win, and not too surprisingly, Lothlorien getting the most kills, but Dorwinian surprisingly close. I think Gondor, of course, they were the victims, certainly, of enemy attackers. Well, of enemy skirmishers more than anything. Lang, obviously. I think Lucky Hussar actually has just shipped off for a bit of national service, so very well played. If this was one of the last games he was in, very, very well played to him indeed. Now we'll see what did the damage for the Misty Mountains, which I'm sure won't be too much of a surprise if we head down here. Actually, the Black Oryx, the Mountain's getting the most kills. That does somewhat surprise me, to be honest with you. They must have been doing a lot of damage to the basic infantry that got left behind when they started to overwhelm the lines. But the crossbows obviously did very well for themselves, and the skirmishers, Snaga skirmishers as well, getting over 100 kills, which for a unit that cheap is obviously very nice. Heavy Goblin Archers were really just there to pressurise, but maybe not many kills, but still did their job. But yeah, pretty much what you'd expect from a Misty Mountains army of this type. The Cave Trolls did okay, but they were really used in battle rather than breaking a line. But yeah, very well played from the defenders, and like I said, Lothlorien deserves a bit of particular credit for the way they were able to turn that around. I thought for sure that when those Witches got into position, Angmar did exactly the right thing there by frying portions of the line, but in the end, the attackers just didn't have enough infantry to claim victory in this fight, and the defenders did. So fair play. I mean, sometimes it does come down to composition choices like that, and sometimes they can help you in the late game, sometimes they can come back to bite you. But yeah, big thank you to all the players that were involved in this battle. Big thank you to Lango, who I believe sent this one to me. I mean, it's from his perspective. I don't think it was Lucky Hussar that sent it to me. But regardless, big thank you to all the players. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.